Okay, I think this is like round 4 on taking this thing apart and fixing it and making sure it worked right. And I've had fun doing this. It's a hobby for me. It's my first almost ready to fly kit. This plane comes stock. It's an almost ready to fly kit. It comes stock with the dive brake and flap operational. Okay, so here's the manual here. And the way the system works from the manufacturers, it has the flap and the dive brake tied together. And Motion RC recommended a HS81 servo 1 tied to this flap, and the dive brake open up and close. Okay, and I just thought it would be really cool. And I saw some comments out there about some other people separating this system, flap separate from the dive brake. So I put 2 HS81 servos in the wing, 1 for flap, 1 for the dive brake, and then I just did some mixing on my transmitter to get them to operate like the real plane would. Okay, here's my dive brake. And I made sure that the control linkage is perpendicular to the hinge line so it doesn't bind up. This is a little HS81 high-tech servo, and it's just operating the dive brake. So I made sure to push it far forward. CG is about right here. So I want to push as far forward as possible. You can see it operating one more time. Okay. For my flap, I have it pinned open so I can show the dive brake in there. But for the flap, I got a piece of plastic from the hobby store. It's 2 millimeter polystyrene. And that's another HS81 high-tech servo. And I epoxied wooden blocks in there, mounted it. I even put a little bit of foam tack underneath the servo to the polystyrene, just a little bit more added protection in there. And so I went through and cut a slit. I used my Dremel and make sure it fits nice and neat, like that. I just brushed the. I just went to the hardware store and matched some paint to this. This is just latex paint, exterior house paint, and not too worried about it, but it did match up pretty nice. And so when I operate my flap, that's nice and flush. I'll get that tied up in just a bit. For the aileron, Motion RC recommended HS425BB, and this thing sits way too high, and it looks kind of goofy. Here's my other wing before I start taking it apart. It just sits really high. And by the way, there's my flap servo on the right wing, and I just didn't like how high that sat, and so I'm just having to take the plate apart again and setting it up properly so that things are more flush and not sitting so high. And so that one's tucked in there. But anyways, back to the aileron servo. I went with the HS77BB high-tech low profile, and that thing sits a lot lower and looks a lot better. And so here's my aileron operating. Okay, and here's my flap. Made sure that the control linkage is perpendicular to the hinge line. Here is partial flap, full flap. Dive brake. I'm gonna call out mid and then high, mid, no dive brake. If I were to dive and play around with this thing while it's flying in the air, I would probably do something like that. Because if I go extreme like this, it might tumble out of the sky and do something kind of funny. So I don't want to play any games up there. Okay, if I'm coming in for a landing and it's not windy, I'll use my flaps. Okay, so my retracts. There you go. They took a while to get nice and flush in there, but they work. Okay, so much better. In my opinion, there's that low profile aileron servo. I was thinking about tucking that one in, but man, that was gonna be a lot of work. But I did tuck in that flap servo right there. There's my lights. That took a while to do. Real carefully, I drilled on the very tip. I like to fly in the evenings, and it just not much light out there, so I wanted to put these lights on there for me so I could see it a little easier. Okay.